Well, have you ever wondered about human design? I have Marco Muhlbach with me. And the reason we have Marco today as a guest is because Helene Hadsell would have been 100 years old this month. She would have turned 100 June 1st, 2024, had she been with us. And so I decided that we want to celebrate Helene and find out more about her, like what made her tick. She loved all her little sayings. Remember what makes you tick, click, get sick? She used to love those iterations. And so I brought Marco here because he is a human design specialist and more, and is going to tell us about Helene from a new perspective. I'm so happy you're with me, and you have a much better background. Why don't you tell us where you're at?
Yeah, well, thank you for the introduction. I'm super stoked to be here. I'm coming at you guys from my little bus studio on the island of Maui in Hawaii. I've been here for about 3 years. Prior to that, I was just like traveling around, being a little nomad, and then ended up being blessed with a child. And me and my partner had our child here just across the river. It's like, this is my little zone where I do all my work. And then my partner and our almost 2-year-old baby now live just across the river. And yeah, we live a very eclectic lifestyle. And so, yeah, and human design has been such a powerful tool for me. It's been my sort of like professional fatherly way of winning bread and earning an income for my family. And so because of that, I'm just so excited to continue to share human design because of the impact that it can have on people.
Okay, now this is unusual because most human design specialists are women. A lot of the woo-woo stuff, when I see my analytics, it's mainly female. And so it's unusual to see a human design specialist that's a male. Tell us how you got into it, because it's really fascinating to me that you are, first of all, you seem younger than most people that would be a specialist, and also that you're male. And so tell us how you came down this path and became an expert in your field.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm 31 also, for reference, for anyone that wants to know out there. And I got turned on to like the spiritual path pretty young. I was like in college watching a bunch of conspiracy videos, experimenting with psychedelics, like just doing, everything. Like my whole bubble was popped. And from there, I called my mom and I was like, Mom, I can't do this. I need to, like, this is bad stuff. I'm going down a bad path. And she's like, oh my God. So I dropped out of college, and she took me to a Reiki master named Marissa Morris, and she did Reiki on me. And that was the beginning of my spiritual journey. From there, I kind of like woke up and realized like, oh, I got to start putting, instead of like zeitgeist and, how the government and big pharma is poisoning us, I got to start like how to meditate and like, how to be mindful and how to eat healthy and all that. So I switched avenues, and that was what really, kind of brought me out of my dark night of the soul in college with all the psychedelics and bubble popping and craziness. And then it wasn't until like, I would say like 5 or 6 years later, which like I was at a grand opening for my friend's yoga studio, and a woman came up to me. And she was just like, can I read your human design? I was like pulling cards and just playing with cards, passing the time. She's like, can I read your human design? I was like, I have no idea what that is, but absolutely. And she pulled up my human design and she goes, oh my God, you're a reflector. And I said, oh my God, what does that mean? Like, I had no idea about human design or what even it was. And she goes, it means you're a part of the 1%. And my ego goes, oh yeah, that's this human design stuff. But to be honest, it didn't really click for me until many, many years later, until I started coming to Maui. This was about 3 years ago from this point now. I was doing some work with a group called Sacred Sons. We were holding these beautiful spaces for men in particular to come together and like, move through some of those bigger emotions, move through shame, violence and anger and all that stuff. And I met a dude who was facilitating with us. His name was Pasha, and he was raised by a reflector. So my type, which is 1% again. And his mom, who was the reflector, was also really good friends with Ra, which is the guy that actually channeled and brought human design through in the 80s. And even though
Wow.
human design pulls from astrology, I Ching, Kabbalah, and the chakra system, which are ancient systems, the synthesis of all four of those is really, it's not even a
Oh,
century old. It was brought through by this guy named Ra in the 80s, and he just took all the pieces, kind of like Iron Man in the first movie, where they're like, build the bomb, and he's like, sure, I'll build the bomb. And so he makes it look like he's building the bomb, but he's actually building the Iron Man suit. When you put all the maps on top of each other and flatten them out, and it's like, oh, there's the big picture. It's kind of what he did with human design. And but when I met someone who really like treated me like my design, that was my kind of like aha moment, like, oh, like this is how life could be. And in little instances where it's like he'd be in an emotional wave and I'd come up wanting to help him through his emotional wave, and he'd be like, Marco, I love you, but like your energy is way too precious to be spent on me and my emotional wave. And no one had ever said that to me. I was so used
wow.
to being welcomed as like, oh yeah, Marco can help with the emotional wave. But here was someone who had a level of emotional resilience and awareness around like that kind of stuff is exhausting for me. I'll do that for someone and then be exhausted for, a couple hours afterwards. And so he would move through his own wave, then he would come back and say, thank you, I love you. I don't want you to spend your energy. It's so precious. Don't spend your energy on my emotional wave. I'll move through it. I'll be fine. You do what you want. And so little things like that, and moments where I'm used to just like sitting and listening like a good little reflector, he would turn around and be like, hey, what do you think about this? And so it was really like in community that human design became the powerful tool that it is today. That's like, again, like 3 years ago is when I started to really 3-4 years now. I really started to dive into it as more of a professional study because I felt the impact and I felt seen, and I felt all these things that I had kind of been looking for in my life. Like I felt it from this one person, and it's because he had awareness of human design, and specifically the dynamics of our auras that are presented to us from human design. You mentioned I'm a man in a industry that's kind of dominated by females, and I love it because there is so much beauty in being able to sort of like leave the body, get ungrounded, move into the higher dimensions. But then how do
Yeah.
we take what we're experiencing within the higher dimensions and bring it back down into the 3D, the kingdom, or the material world? Right. And this is where my great study has been, because ever since I started learning about human design, I've been trying to break it. And it's part of my human design. I'm a 3-5.
Oh,
So
that's
I'm
so
here to like
interesting.
mistakes and like provide solutions. And so I've been like trying to break human design. That's what I mean by like studying it. I'm looking to poke holes. And this is something that Helene, I just, from reading a little bit of her book and then looking at her chart as well, we share a gate. Specifically, it's gate 39, and it's this provocative, like creating obstructions to see what is actually under the surface. And it's really about exposing emotional abundance. And this is
Oh,
one of the channels that she actually has, is this 3955, which is called, it's about emoting, and it's a design of moodiness. And I have a part of that channel. I don't have the entire channel, but I'm definitely one type of person to like poke at things and be like, yeah, you didn't really answer my question. Can you go back and answer the question? Also, like, you want
that
to
was
talk about?
her for
Yeah,
sure.
exactly. So
And also, you said moodiness.
yep.
Yeah, she if once you read all of her books and you really because we didn't have time from by the time you got them in the mail till
Right.
now. When you finish reading, you'll see that she was quite a character emotionally. She was very I like to use the word quirky,
Yeah.
eclectic, and yeah, she was something. Well, I think also because in astrology she's a Gemini sun,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm in Gemini rising, but Capricorn is my sign, and she was a Capricorn midheaven. So I'm thinking, okay, we're just like two peas in a pod on one side and the other. And that's why I was wondering, we'll talk more later about how her human design and my human design are reflectors, like because reflecting each other
Mm-hmm.
or tied together like sisters,
Yeah.
because she had her work and now I'm continuing like a relay race. She handed me the torch and now I'm running with it, and at some point in time, because I won't be here forever either, I'll pass that torch on to somebody else so all of it can keep going.
Mm. Absolutely. Yeah. And I was looking already at your composites, which is when we take two body graphs and put them on top of each other. And you
Oh,
guys,
you can do that.
oh yeah, oh yeah. You guys have let's see how many. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 electromagnetic channels, which is where, like I was mentioning before, like how I have a gate, but she has the whole channel. Electromagnetics are when you have one gate, she has the other gate, and you guys like team up. So there's like a literal completing of circuits, and that happens 7 times. Like
That's crazy.
it's pretty normal for people to have like 1 or 2, maybe 3. Me and my partner have, I think, 6. 7's a lot. 7's a lot.
No surprise, because
Not surprised at all.
we
Yeah.
we talked about this at the beginning, how I came to meet her, and this is why I think there's a soul contract with her and I, obviously, because our human design reflects that.
Right.
Because I had a podcast back in the day. I always say I had a podcast before it was cool, and I had her on as a guest, and off air, because everybody does it now. They talk off air before they go on and make sure that they're all on the same page. But I asked her off air if I could come visit her, and she says no. And 3 days later, she phoned me back and said, "Your spirit guides are so loud, you better come visit." So she didn't want anything to do with it. And my guides are like, "You need to listen, because this lady has something." And she reluctantly had me over. She was very hospitable, though. And while I was there, she said, "You need to teach maneuvers for witchcraft, because no one else is going to do it." And her family at that time was not interested in maintaining her legacy. And she thought, if I don't give this to somebody, then it's going to die with me. And I had some things that she didn't. Like, I'm very techie. I'm entrepreneurial. She tried to be entrepreneurial, but she wasn't very good at it. And I had already written books, and I understood the contesting world. So we had a lot in common. And now I know even why. So what are the 7? Like, are they specific ones?
Yeah, absolutely. I could share my screen if you wanted to see it.
You know what? I don't know how to show the other person's screen on StreamYard. I'm going to be honest. I'm still learning the program.
Let's see if I can you see it?
I think I can share it. Oh my gosh. Hold on. I can add to the stage. Oh, I did it.
Bingo. So here are here's your guys' body graph. So Carolyn, you're over here in the yellow. Helene's going to be in the green. Anywhere you see green on the body graph, that's going to be Helene. Anywhere you see yellow is going to be you. And I like to think of this like literally like a map. Like if we're like flying above, like this is a town, that's a town, that's a town, that's a town. And these are roads that are opened based off of your guys' definition. It's a helpful way to look at it. And because these roads are open, like for instance, Helene has this 16, which is all about power skills. It's all about how you say, what skills do I want to develop? 48 down here, this is the spleen. So this is going to be fear of things lacking depth. And so this is the depth to the skills. Whereas Helene has this wonderful skill, maybe, in terms of like writing or channeling or whatever it is. And it could be simple things like gardening. But she won't necessarily always be able to access the deeper meaning or the depth or the underlying, like, how does this skill make me deep? You, on the other hand, have that sense, that awareness of like, what is deep, what is meaningful, also what is lacking depth, what is faking depth, and then which skills are faking depth or hiding depth or actually creating depth and exposing depth. So this is all about like you can see here in this platform real quick for anybody that is interested in learning about human design. It's called Neutrino Platform. Neutrino Design is the app version of it. This is the web version, Neutrino Platform. And this is just such an incredible system because, again, there's so much information here, but one thing that we can do is we can actually go in here and it shows us from your guys' composite all of the electromagnetic channels. We're talking about the 1648. I can literally come in here, click on it, and it's going to tell me everything really that I need to know about this channel in terms of it being, called the channel of the wavelength, the keynote of being a design for talent, right? So bringing the intuitive expression of logic from the spleen to the throat. And it just goes on and on and on. And
Oh, I
for
see.
me to have this as a resource, again, is it's invaluable because, you know, for me, what I'm looking to do is help people. Well, how do I like see this channel in real life? Right? Like, what is I if I know this information, like, oh, we have the channel of the wavelength together, how do we use that in real life? For me, it's about extrapolating that, like, okay, well, where does that design for talent come together? Obviously, you've helped put Helene's work out to the world, and it's no accident because you have seven of these electromagnetic channels where
That
you
is
got one side,
crazy.
you know, you got access to one side of the town, she's got access to the other side of the town. And now suddenly, because you guys are just physically together or energetically intertwined with each other, now there's messages and trade routes and agreements that can get set up between these towns that normally would not be there. Because if you look at your guys' charts individually, like, you're both very sacral, emotional beings. And I would say she's probably maybe the more emotional one, because her circuitry is between the root and the sacral, the root and the solar plexus, and it's about melancholy and that moodiness, again, that
Yes.
poking energy, whereas yours is about bonding and mating. And it's not it's specifically it's
That's
for like
interesting.
creating new children, but your emotional wave is tribal, whereas hers is individual. Which the difference between that is, like, the individual is just kind of like basically like chill with moments of like crazy, either like crazy happy or like super sad and depressed for seemingly no reason. Whereas yours is a little bit more ratcheting. So it'll be like the same issue or the same emotional rise that like gets intense, then it kind of chills out, then it gets more intense, then it kind of chills out, then it gets even more intense, then kind of chills out. And these two different waves have different remedies for them. Like for you, it's
Wow.
much better to get a hand on the shoulder or get a hug. Whereas for her, she has to go be alone. She has to go channel. She has to go
Oh my
sit
gosh.
and sit with the melancholy. Otherwise, these emotions for both of you, like if you don't get what you need, which is touch, and if she doesn't access that moodiness and that emotions by being alone, this is where, you know, the emotions kind of come out sideways, where now you're yelling at your partner because, you know, they left the toilet seat up, or something like really simple, making mountains out of molehills. A lot of this comes from you know, improperly processing the emotions, which again is a huge part of my study, because I'm a martial artist and because I've done a lot of somatic work and Reiki work. I'm really like, okay, I get we can shift the mindset, but then how do we get that mindset to actually be installed in the body? What are the buttons that we have to press? And again, for Helene, it was the alone button, and for
Wow.
you, it's the platonic touch button, right? And so looking,
Yeah.
just knowing that right out the gates, you can help so many people, especially because human design helps us to access what we call inner authority, which is the thing that
Yes.
helps pressurize against external authority, which is like what the government wants, what, you know, our families want, what our partners and our friends or our bosses or colleagues may want for us. Everyone's got ideas about how to, you know, oh, you should do this and you'll be successful, you should do this and you'll be a great manifester. But ultimately, the only true insights are going to come from within, and they're specifically going to come for you and Helene. You guys have the same point of authority, which is the solar plexus, which is the emotional center. And
Let's
one,
see hers on her own again. Yeah.
yeah, right over here on the right, this is Helene's. So you guys have also very similar body graphs in general. Like the only difference, center wise, which these are the 9 centers of the body graph,
Mm-hmm.
is this spleen getting turned on. And so real quick, just to give people some context as well, you know, what you're looking at here is a 9-centered body graph, and each of these centers is either going to be defined or undefined. So these colored in ones are defined, and this is Helene right here. The colored in one's defined, so she has the root, the sacral, and the solar plexus. And you can think of these defined centers like speakers, like they're putting her vibration out into the world. So when she's like in her flow and feeling creative, she's like, ooh, yeah, like very, how you say, her sacral is generating these sounds. She's putting her emotions out there. She's putting her pressure specifically, like, hey, we need to this is done cooking. We need to pull this out of the oven. We need to start the next thing. That's what this channel is all about. But these are the speakers. And then these ones that are white, these are undefined centers. These are the microphones. So this is where she's like picking up on your thoughts, picking up on your problems, picking up on, you know, the way that you're manifesting, picking up on your identity, picking up on your ego. And then this is the area, this center right here is going to be the spleen, which is where, Carolyn, you have the spleen, Helene doesn't. And so when you and Helene were together, right, because you guys would physically be together, what happened was her spleen was picking up on your spleen's vital information. And if you can see down here, you have what's called, this is like the channel of ambition, right? This is about pressurizing things. 54 is like the pressure to like achieve further, right? 32 is the awareness of what can we achieve and what can we not achieve. You know, Helene's got that awareness of like, this can work, this can't work, but she doesn't have the pressure or the energy to fuel it. So when you would come along, right, it would create this, this access to like, oh my gosh, now we can work together on what can actually be brought into the world. And it's literally, this channel is about kind of how you say, not necessarily comparison, but it's like, well, if that group over there has, you know, 10 books published and a movie, and we only have 5 books published, like how do we get to 11 books and 2 movies, right?
That's exactly what happened with her, because her son, I talked to Dyke, we found some old tapes, but I didn't find all of them. So I had what I did find digitized, and I'm sharing them on my website and YouTube so other people can hear. But I asked Dyke about it, and he said, we gave Mother a tape recorder and she wouldn't use it. And she had wanted her books to be audiobooks because they had, you know, closer to the end of her life, CD books were available. Like you could go to the library and there were audiobooks, but there wasn't like an Audible. And so I have done things that she thought of but didn't complete, which is exactly that human design. So I've translated her books. I've got 3 more that we're working on. So it's already English and Spanish. We're working on German, Italian, and French. So none of her books were ever translated. And then the audiobook, which she has notes, like I have notes that she talked about, oh, this would be a good audiobook. She never did it, even though they gave her a tape. Obviously, just a tape recorder in your home wouldn't have been a great copy, but.
Well, here's the thing about both your guys' charts. So both of you are what we call generators. And the generator is because of this center right here. And this is, so I mentioned before, this center over here, the solar plexus, the brown one, this is where all the emotions are. And this is emotional awareness and emotional energy. So both of you are aware of your emotions, right? When you're in the emotions, there's no escaping those emotions. Another center that you have,
up and down.
Like there could be somebody else like totally going through, like for instance, me, I have an undefined emotional center. Like you could look at my chart right here. Everything is undefined for me.
Wow.
Right? So if I was going through an emotional wave and you and Helene walked in the room and you guys were also in an emotional wave, like let's say you were stoked about something, you know, it wouldn't really matter what I was going through. I would just pick up on like, oh, they're stoked. They're emotionally, they have like, you know, high emotional energy. I'm on an emotional low. I would start to pick that up. I would reflect it. Exactly. Or I might say something like, hey guys, like I really need to go be with these emotions. So I would remove myself. But it's, you know, again, when you have these defined centers, it means that it's like, this is your experience. And you either know this is your experience or you know that this is not your experience. Like there's certain things that would come up for you in relationships that were like emotionally charged that you were like, like not going to deal with that. That's not mine. I'm not supposed to process that. That's yours. You're projecting on me. Now that is because of your guys' aura, and your aura is the way that it is because of this sacral. So you're both sacral beings. You both have defined sacral, and the sacral, this is the center for creative life force. This is also sexual energy. Now this is either on and like, ooh, I like it, or ew, disgusted, get away from me. Now this creates an enveloping aura, meaning like stuff is just coming towards you. And all you have to do is tune into those precognitive sounds, right? It's not like, oh yes, this is wonderful, it's a delicacy, I love this thing. It's a ooh, this feels right. It's before language, and it's either a rising, a generating of energy, a generating. You can think of it. The best way to think of it really is like hunger and sexual satisfaction, right? When you're eating really good food, it's like right? Versus disgusting food. Oh, I don't want that, right? But a lot of people, they'll go up into the mind and they'll think like, for instance, someone puts a dish in front of you, and maybe it's like a good friend of yours, and you smell the dish, and it's like, ugh. That's your gut response. But your brain is like, oh, but if you say that out loud or you don't eat the food, then your friend is going to feel very offended. And so let's just say you already ate. Let's lie, right? Put it in air quotes. Let's lie instead of just being like, it doesn't really feel appetizing to me. And this is where a lot of people can really benefit in terms of especially accessing manifestation, because you were mentioning that earlier. Your guys' point of manifestation is literally about response. So for instance, that tape recorder, right? Tape recorder doesn't really give much to respond to, especially if it's just like, oh, here's a tape recorder, like here's all the things that you have to do. And then the tape recorder, what gets put on the desk or like under clutter or in a drawer or something. And generators, you're designed to respond. This is how you best use your aura. So anything moving towards you is what you're going to respond to. And there's an infinite number of things that are moving towards all of us at any instant.
Oh, and it's faster now.
It just gets lost. Exactly. And it's even faster now with the internet. But the tape recorder gets lost in all of that. Also, there's probably the sacral response that she got was like I don't want to record myself. And this is one thing about a lot of generators, is that it's really helpful to understand that even if you just have someone that like kind of helps to initiate or gives you things to respond to, like one of the exercises I'll do with the people that I work with is I'll help to calibrate their sacral. So I'll ask them questions like, are you wearing glasses? Are you sitting down? Are you standing up? Do you have energy? And whether you say it or not, your gut is responding to those questions like, wearing glasses, not standing up. Do you feel hot? Don't feel hot, right? Even if your brain is also like, responding as well, your gut is going to respond to those things. So it's really helpful as a generator to, for instance, if you're having trouble making a decision, it might be that the decision is too open-ended. What do you want to have for dinner? Rather than, hey, do you want Chinese food? Do you want pasta? Do you want a hamburger? Right? Do you want a salad? Do you want fruit? So that your gut actually has something to respond to.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Exactly. And so with that, again, it's using that aura, that energetic field, because the aura is naturally just pulling things towards you. And this is one thing that Helene probably figured out. I would imagine she figured it out, is this concept of manifestation that's not how you say externalized, right? A lot of the times people that are looking for secrets or codes or how do I manifest, they're looking at the way other people will manifest, and then they're attempting to recreate that in their own lives, not considering, oh, I might be a different kind of manifester. And each of us has a unique way of manifesting, but ultimately the idea is the same. Sync up with your own energy. Now, what is your own energy? Well, this is your own energy. Your body graph shows us what areas like are supposed to be firing all the time. Like for Helene, she has this channel, which this 3955, this is about abundance. And specifically,
she did that in spades.
Exactly, like emotional abundance. And then this one right here, this 5342, this is like the pressure to bring things to maturity and the satisfaction that you get when you like finish a book or when you close a chapter of something so that something new can begin. And those are her 2 points. It's like she would get satisfaction from completing things, and then she would also feel and experience life by way of her emotions by poking at stuff. Like that was her entire existence. And she probably, when she was communicating with, her higher self, other people's higher selves, that was one of the messages that she was always getting. And a lot of the times the higher self is always like, be yourself, be yourself, be yourself in your limited way, so that your circuitry can kick on. Because again, so many people will try to live their life out of these undefined centers, but what happens is you end up trying to solve everybody else's problem. You're always trying to convince people that you're certain about stuff. You're always seeking attention. You know, you're always looking for love and validation in the
She
external
loved
world.
attention, by the way.
Yeah.
She even wrote that in one of the books, and she even says, I'm a show off. And I thought, oh my God, can you imagine? She would have had a YouTube channel. Like, she was around when YouTube was around, but because she wasn't techie, it wasn't a thing. And when I visited her, I didn't even have a camera. Like, I wish I'd had enough technology that I could have filmed her, but I didn't. I did get an audio recording, and then I could only imagine her on TikTok because she was quirky and loved attention. So yeah, she would have, if she had been techie enough, she would have loved TikTok. Like, if we were the same age, she would have been just out there. But what's interesting is you were saying how she did things from emotion. And if you read some of her stories, she was very emotional and did like poking the bear. Like, her friend took her to meet Jose Silva because he was hosting an introductory class. And she decided his Spanish accent, like, he was Mexican, and his accent was so thick, she decided she went up to him and said, you need to slow down. We can't understand you. And he did. And he ended up working with her. Yeah. And she had the nerve to stand up after the class and say, would you like to come to our house for dinner? And he said, sure. And everyone's like, what? So she did stuff that other people wouldn't do because of that, I think.
Yeah, well, and you know what it is too. It's and people that are praised for their individuality and praised for their uniqueness, they're just as equally demonized and cast down and hated by a whole other group of people. And this is 100%. Where, you know, the support that human design can offer us is like not just running experiments just for the sake of running experiments, but actually to create a life that is repulsive to a certain group of people that don't that literally are unable to accept us in our full capacity. And this is why they say is like, you know, if you don't have any haters, you're not really doing anything, because you're not really anything unique or anything individual. And manifestation is not about what you get. It's about what you manifest, which is your physical body, your emotions, what relationships we manifest. And in human design, everything is manifested through the throat. But with someone who has an undefined throat like this, right, these centers are not, she's not designed to be constantly manifesting. Same thing with you, Carolyn. You're not designed to be constantly manifesting. It's only really when people, like for somebody with like the 12 shows up with how you say Helene, that's when the manifestation starts to happen. It's when you have one of these 4 motor centers connected to the throat that manifestation can actually start to occur. And with your guys' composite, I mean, there's so many ways for energy to move up to the throat. You have, and what's funny is like none of it is actually purely emotional. So these are the purely emotional manifesting channels, the 35, 36, the 12, 22. Your guys' way of manifestation when you're together is much more, how you say, unique, in the sense that it moves through the channel of surrender and then up into the channel of the wavelength, in the sense that this right here is all about innovating. 44 is fear of the past, 26 is the will to be the best. And so it's like, what do we need? Because we know what happened before. What do we need in order to be the best? And then again, this depth and talent, what are the skills necessary to actually take us deep? Those innovation and depth and skill are that's the avenue primarily that your guys' manifestation, your collaboration came together. And that's the thing too, is like most of us are built, like 90% of us are built to manifest in collaboration with others, to co-create with others. Exactly. Community and composites and tribes and smaller groups. But again, everyone wants to like solo the boss, right? I did it by myself, that kind of stuff. Or people are not necessarily aware of their circuitry and their body. And so again, they're doing this thing where, you know, for instance, with these undefined centers, like specifically this top one, this is like sensitive to other people's inspiration. or sensitive to other people's problems. You both have this. And Carolyn, yours is actually fully open. So you see how there's no defined center or defined gates in here, whereas Helene has these two. What
Yeah,
this
that
means,
makes sense because I've always said I'm going up a mountain. Who's coming with me? And I've never done anything alone. Like, I can't write those books alone. I mean, I needed the files from, I had to get all the files and books from Dyke. And then I had to have someone go over what I did and make sure it was edited. And then I had to have printers, and then I needed a producer for the audiobooks. And then I needed my web guy to do all the digital part of it. You know, like I've had to have a team because I've known for a long time I'm not an island. Like,
right.
Yeah, I can steer the boat or set it to the destination, but I sure as heck knew I could never do it alone, even though I sit alone in my office a lot of times and do it all electronically. But yeah, it's interesting to see how that works and how her and I, we're obviously destined to work together and for me to bring her stuff into the modern world. But she also knew, because you were stating her emotions and her awareness. Her first book came out in 1971 and the second edition came out in 88. She did not write about all of her woo-woo stuff outright, like in contact with other realms, until 2001, because she knew in 1971 people weren't ready to hear it. And that's why she wrote it as a sweepstakes book. And all the lessons were around the winning. But if you read her stuff, and I really hit me, I highly recommend everybody read your motivational, inspirational books out loud to yourself. Because when I was doing the Audible edition, and I've edited her book probably what felt like 100 times, making sure it was right before it went to print. There was stuff that she had said that only when I said it verbally did I really get the depth and impact of her words. So I imagine it's not just her, it's also other authors, that when you read it out loud, you go, whoa, it hits different when you hear it too. And it's interesting to really grasp some of her depth. Like you said, she went deep, and she was even deeper than I had originally thought in some of her teachings. And she buried it under the fun and guise of winning because she knew that people couldn't accept it that way. And then by 2001, she knew, yeah, I can tell people I talked to angels and I saw somebody levitate, and I've levitated, and I used my crystal ball and all this stuff that we back then would be like, you're a witch. That's why she calls it witchcraft, because she knew she was heading it off, that people she didn't want people to call it witchcraft, so she called it wishcraft.
Right, get right out ahead of it.
Get ahead of it. And that again ties back to what you're saying with the human design. She had that awareness.
Right. And also you were mentioning depth too, and acknowledging her depth. And she was probably deeper than she even realized. You know, that's
probably, yeah.
I could feel that when we were when I was reading the first the Confessions of an 83-Year-Old Sage, like that first story she tells and how she sets it up. I'm like, this woman is so deep, but like she actually doesn't realize how deep she is, and how profound and how simple a lot of her teachings are and her experiences are. And so, you know, that really made me like her right off rip, that she was just like, I didn't really plan it. I'm just going to sit down. I'm going to start writing. It's like,
yeah, great. She was, I wish I had spent more time with her. Clearly, I know she's hanging around.
Yeah.
Because things sometimes happen and I'm like, all right. But I do notice, like you said, she was an individual. There was parts of her family she openly wrote that she didn't like one of her kids, and she would be by herself. And I think this is why she was really drawn to the Silva method, because it's meditation based, which would put her alone. And she did talk about the meditating. And because of how I am, which you showed the human design, and I'm in the Silva instructor training program right now, because I'm working on so many things it's going to take me a little longer to get the certification than other people. So end of this year, definitely next year. I struggle sometimes with the meditation because to bring it down. And I think it's, again, tied to how my human design is versus hers.
Well,
so
these two centers up here, do you have a question there?
No, sorry.
So these two centers, this is called the head and this is called the ajna. This is what to think about. This is how to think about it. Now, both of you guys have undefined head and ajna, meaning that there's not really a specific thing that you're supposed to be thinking about, nor is there a specific way for you to be thinking about it. These two help us with the external world, right? You could think in terms of like our senses, not only just like our physical senses, but our sixth senses and our energetic senses. Those all exist up here. So these reach out into the external world the same way that our eyes pick up light or our ears pick up vibration.
Okay.
And they collect everything that's going on in the world, and then they feed it down into kind of like the factory or the processing unit, which we call the body. That's all happening through, just to get scientific, through the trigeminal nerve coming up and around the ear, down the vagus nerve, down into the solar plexus again, and the gut. And so with undefined centers like this, meditation is, it's completely necessary for beings with undefined head and ajnas to meditate, because if we don't, we are not able to recognize the different flavors of, for instance, problems that have no relevance to us, or inspiration that is not, like, how you say, relevant to us at all. This is equivalent to, on the like most extreme end, it's like, you're up late at night because the characters in the TV show that you're watching are going through like a tough time, and it's keeping you up at night. Or you're thinking about, why didn't this character just do this? That would be so much better. That's kind of like, put that into like a real life situation. It's like, why is my friend, still like using? Or why is my friend still cheating or doing whatever? And it's the ability to process and think about things that are, again, not relevant to us. And there's nothing wrong with that. But without meditation, you can't recognize the different flavors, because that has a different flavor than being genuinely inspired through your own gut and your own emotion. And this is why it's like so many teachings across the board are really like saying, like, the mind is an illusion. Because the mind is a compilation of everything that we sense in the external world. But of course, we know, like, the internal world is just as real, if not more real at times, than the external world. And we know that because sometimes we're moving through things that other people, like, they have no awareness or idea of it, particularly like emotions or feelings of safety, again, having to do with the nervous system. And so really so much of meditation and learning, not how to still the mind or stop the mind, but how to watch the mind. Right? This is like the true wishcraft is being able to watch, like, everything kind of pooling around in your mind, and not necessarily trying to stop it, but actually starting to see, okay, this thought comes from this person, that thought comes from this person, and not in some kind of like, mental way, but from like a physical way. Like, the more meditation that I've done, and I've been meditating pretty regularly for like a dozen years now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's 2012 is when I kind of had my awakening.
That's fantastic that you started so young. Some you started like at 19. That's amazing, because I'm old enough to be your mother.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why I was so stoked, and because I my time is really precious, especially since I have a little kid. And the energy that you brought forward reminded me of when I first woke up. It was, someone like you who was like, Marco, like, you have a lot of potential as a healer, and you're here to do great things. And just someone believed in me, and then gave me access to tools and practices and guidance that is the reason why I live the life that I live now. And a lot of my friends that I went to high school and college with are doing something else that I have judgments about. But it's just because, like, I'm so grateful for this life, and specifically my mom, who was the one who kind of saw me going through the societal, factory system of, like, turning people into robots and soldiers and doctors and on all that. And she was like, yeah, let's pull you out of that. And it was actually me dropping out of college and going through my whole process that caused her to have her awakening, and my father as well, and my whole family. So it really rippled outward. Me just starting to like, ask the right kinds of questions, or really to start acting like myself. And again, with myself, my circuitry is completely undefined.
Wow.
So there's and it's very, how you say, I wouldn't necessarily say challenging to be a reflector. It's definitely I've had a challenging life, not like how you say, in terms of like I had both my parents, was never abused, but there were so many instances where it's like I couldn't tell the difference between what I wanted and what like my girlfriend wanted, or what I wanted and what my boss wanted. And I would end up spending a lot of energy doing those things, looking for the fulfillment, looking for the pat on the back, the recognition, all that. And it would never satisfy me, or it would never bring me any sense of peace. And it wasn't until, again, I learned about human design and I learned about my strategy as a reflector, to just like, for the reflector, our strategy, yours again, is wait and respond with the gut. Follow that. Mine is like, spend 28 days considering something before you do it. And this is like, when I first heard that, I was like, that's ridiculous. How am I supposed to wait 28 days to set up a meeting? Really? But now it's like, if people want to work with me, they know Marco's a reflector and he needs like 2-3 months. If I want him to work at my retreat, I got to give him 2 to 3 months to feel into it. And I can't expect an answer right away. So
I'm lucky then, because I messaged you late because I was having trouble finding a human design expert that I connected with, and I found you on TikTok. Highly recommend his TikTok, just saying. And link is below. Always, I connected him, and then I sent you her books, and I said, hey, would you consider being on the the podcast? Right? I don't even know a YouTube show. And you said sure, and it was not 28 days. So that again, see, this is where I think Helene, because she's on the other side, is kind of maybe help speed things up a little.
Right.
Because she comes in and goes, Marco, please do this.
Well, it was instant. It was instant for me. And this is the thing, is the more that I've given myself the opportunity to experiment more with my strategy, like there's things where I'm not sure. Like I'm just genuinely not sure if like I want to do this thing or not. I put that into the bag. Then there's things where I'm like instantly beyond my physical body, because again, this is representation of like the physical body and the mind, but there is a realm beyond the physical body and the mind, right? You can call it destiny, you can call it like, the golden path, the higher self, or whatever.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, yeah, when it like in the middle of reading your email, I was like, yes, completely. And so whether that was Helene or me also just getting to a point of maturity with my design, because I've been doing this for again, like a decade or so. It's like, there comes a point when, and especially for me as a third line, my profile 3-5, where it's like you got to break the rules a little bit, and suffer the consequences, because this life is not about being perfect. It's not, for me as a reflector, it's not about being surprised all the time. It's about sometimes being disappointed. For you as a generator, it's about sometimes being frustrated. These are what you would call like markers, or not self markers, that let you know, hey, listen to your gut, follow your emotions more. And so it goes beyond, again, the mental, like, oh, wait for my gut, wait for my gut response. Eventually, after practicing this for a certain amount of time, it becomes second nature. It's like lifting your hand up. You don't need to think, okay, now I am lifting my right arm. It's just like, just move the arm,
that
right?
makes sense. Because one of my lessons that I learned, and I always tell people, listen to their intuition, is that I had a few gut responses that I didn't listen to, and later went, why didn't I listen to it? Because it wasn't logical. It made no sense up here.
Yeah.
But down there it was like, and I went, that doesn't make any sense. And then later I'm like, oh my gosh, why didn't I listen to it? If I listened to it, my life would have looked completely different.
Mm-hmm.
So now that's my number one thing. If I get a hit, an instant hit, one of my favorite quotes from a fella called Robert Ohado: first hit, best hit. First, he has basically it's first instinct, like yes, and yeah, first hit, best hit. So even if it makes no sense.
Yeah. And it really is like that, because, you know, there's no logic applied to, let's go to your chart real quick. There's really no logic applied to the sacral. Sacral also doesn't want to explain itself, right? Like if you're like, I'm going to go do that. And people are like, why would you want to go do that? The proper response is because, it's not, oh, it makes sense because of this, and it's going to further my career and blah, 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 blah. And that's similar to what I experienced with you. It was like, you know, I'm not really looking to advance my career. I'm really just looking to find the best avenues to deliver human design, and specifically my perspective on human design, to the masses, because I know how impactful it is. And even just acting as a, you know, I've really only been like a quote unquote human design professional, although I consider myself more of a human design heretic, for like the last 2-3 years. You know,
Helene would have loved you.
Who their lives completely transformed, completely turned around. And so much of it is based off these little, like, use your strategy, experiment with using your strategy. Because it's baffling how blind we are to the conditioning that we have, right? The like, oh, mom and dad were always thinking about these problems, so I'm going to think about these problems. Or mom would always get attention this way, so I'll get attention this way. And these are not, it's not to say that those are not healthy, but if you don't keep, especially with these undefined centers, right, we were talking about earlier, if you don't keep these centers open and undefined, this is where you start to fall into some of these not self themes, which for the head, it's like, you know, constantly being inspired by other people or thinking about other people's problems, that drives you to go solve other people's problems. Here, this head and or the ajna here, how to think about things. Like for certain people, it's like they see someone solve a problem using logic. Other people, they see them solve a problem using like mysticism or something more abstract. They attempt to use that, how you say, habitually. It might work a couple times, but it's not necessarily your way. And also manifesting from the brain, from the head and the ajna, there's no energy up here. It's just pressure.
For us,
for all, even if people have these defined, this is a pressure center and this is awareness center, but unless it's energized, it's not going to materialize. That's the thing.
Oh, that's a good quote.
Yeah, unless it's energized, it's not going to materialize, because in order to bring something into the physical world, there has to be something in the physical world that's offering it a space, or like opening up a portal. You can think about birth, for instance. You know, it's like two beings physically have to create a body. Then once that body is created, then the soul can come through. The soul can help orchestrate those two beings meeting and creating the opening, but there has to be something in this physical world, you know, because then otherwise people would just be like, you know, materializing elephants out of thin air. It's like, no, you need the physical matter. You have to make the cup to collect the water. Otherwise, it can rain. You might be thirsty, but if you don't have the cup to collect the water, you're not drinking anything. So manifestation is very, how you say, it's very, it gets convoluted with like the law of attraction. It's like manifestation is about, again, manifesting yourself and manifesting a being that is, you know, waiting for the right people to collaborate with, waiting to respond in order to do something. That's much better than a frustrated version of yourself that's like constantly trying to go out and like make things happen. You know what I mean? And
I think that's why Helene was so successful, because she was unapologetically herself.
Right. Exactly. And that's something that, you know, again, there's a lot of everyone has the opportunity to be themselves, and even more so now with the information that we can access with human design, like even just the keynotes of, like, you know, abundance, and then let's see what this one is: balanced development, maturation, abundance and maturation. Those are her channels right there. Moodiness, open, you know, emoting, right? Live based off those, live with your strategy, live in harmony with your authority. And this is where now you're going to actually be able to start manifesting your unique life. And again, that you have to work against the inertia of having manifested other people's versions of you, or versions of yourself that are appeasing to other people, appeasing to the external authority. And there's an inertia to work against that. It's like in the sense that you have to like actually do work and push against it, because our brain works in 18-month cycles in terms of our refresh rate. Like if you go, I always tell people as well, if you're going through a breakup and you want to manifest a partner, or you want to be with a partner that is not like the person you just left, give yourself 18 months for the neuroplasticity in your brain to reset itself. 18-month cycles is the brain's cycle. 7 years is the body's cycle. And so really,
okay, I've heard the 7 years. I went 4 years by myself after the divorce. I just stayed by myself for 4 years because I thought, I'm a hot mess. I don't want to date a hot mess. So I'm not going to. I had enough sense. I had enough sense to know. And then I waited. And then I really thought about what I wanted.
Yeah.
And I decided that I call him my husband. We were opposites. And, opposites attract. But sometimes it causes problems. And so then he's not happy and I'm not happy. Like it wasn't great sometimes. So it was better to not be together. And then when I was looking for somebody, I thought, I want somebody whose values align with mine. I said, I wanted the male version of me. Well, heck, I got that in spades. George is just like me. So sometimes he'll say something and I'll go, do it just the way I do it. Because he'll do it the same way because we think the same. It's kind of funny.
I'm curious what his chart looks like now.
Yeah, we'll talk after.
Okay.
But yeah, you can manifest, but I was patient. I thought, no, I'm going to wait till like I'm ready this time.
Yeah.
And thought about seriously what I wanted. So I wasn't, trying to fill a wound, because I had enough sense to know that if I just jumped into something else, I'm trying to fill a hole that you're supposed to fill yourself.
Right. Exactly.
And I think Helene figured that out really early in life. But I also think that's why she did some of her stuff, because I don't think she was born at a time where you got married and you were a housewife or a school teacher or a nurse.
Right.
Because 1924. And so she was a housewife. And I asked Dyke one time, how come she started doing, the sweepstakes and things like that. And he says, I think she was just bored. So she just found something to fill her day and was good at it. Like really good at it.
Well, and that's the the reality of a generator is like, when your gut lights up about something, whether it's sweepstakes or whatever, it's not supposed to make sense to anybody else. And especially if it doesn't make sense to anybody else, but you are getting that internal hit, that internal wisdom, that sacral response. It's like, hey, there's fuel it's in the engine, and the engine is going drive somewhere. We have these vehicles and we each kind of have like a different fuel. And if you don't use up that fuel, then the car is just running through the night. It's like, if you ever have trouble sleeping, especially for generators out there, which there's going to be a lot, 70% of the world has this defined sacral, this red center right here. So
70% of people are generators?
Are either generators or manifesting generators, but it's essentially the same in terms of strategy and with this center, and the gut always works the same. It's that like kind of experience. But if you don't use up this fuel on what it's supposed to be, like what it's being generated for, it just burns all night and you can't sleep. It's that restlessness of like, my body is so tired, but like there's still energy inside me. Like the best thing for a generator is to like do things that their gut is generating energy for. And then by the time they get to the bed, they're like, and then they have no problem falling asleep because they've exhausted their sacral. And what a lot of people do is, instead of exhausting their sacral, they'll do all the things they think they're supposed to do and get, look for the feedback in the external world, rather than like When is my gut satisfied? This also works in terms of like, everyone might be stuffing their face thinking it's the food is so good, and maybe you have a couple bites and your gut's like, nah, I'm done eating this, right? A lot of people will look around, and again, the example of the food is like, oh, I don't want to be offensive. Oh, but it's like, what about you? How are you disrespecting yourself by continuing to eat food that your gut has already said, we're done, no more of this food, no more of this food. And the thing about the sacral and the gut, again, is it's like it's pretty instant. It's pretty instant, this gut response. And what's cool about this gut response is the contrast to the solar plexus and the emotional centers, because it's like when you're in your emotions, your gut does not work. Not well, at least. When you're in your emotional wave, it's like things that are like not good for you, you might be like, I want that, and vice versa. And so when you're in the emotional wave, those are opportunities to like, okay, I'm gonna take a step back from making decisions, and I'm going to refine this fuel. Because what happens for Helena when she gets her alone time, and for you when you get what you need, your touch, then it becomes like a super fuel. This emotional energy gives you a sense of clarity with moving forward, of like, look, I've felt everything that is inside my body that I need to feel, which is different than I've thought about all the possible outcomes, right? Certainty comes from up here, and it comes from weighing metrics in the external world. Clarity comes from emotionally and somatically experiencing anything that's going on in your body. And I mean anything. Like if you're mad at your partner and you want to like tell him that you're going to kick him out of the house and he's going to be homeless and he's a dirtbag and all this stuff, it's crazy because people will not say it and they'll feel bad for thinking it. But it's like when you're in the emotional wave, it's like that's like the cocoon. Everything goes. It's all fair in love and war. And if there's the thing too, is if you don't say you're a dirtbag, I want to kick you out and I want you to be homeless, what's going to happen is that actually gets caught in your throat. People's throats are surprisingly small. Same with their wrist, because everyone is holding on to these things. But if you look at the hand, when you close the fist, the wrist is really small versus when you open it, the wrist gets bigger. Same thing happens with our necks. And so physically the act of opening the hands, this is I can receive. And most people are like this. It's the equivalent of like the clenched fist. And so if we can do things to actually widen the neck, deepen the eyes, open the ear holes, open the mouth, there's a bunch of exercises, which has kind of been my recent work, is what are the exercises physically to actually, like, for instance, I have this exercise for the head when I feel like I'm thinking about other people's problems or I'm under a mental load that I'm suspicious is maybe this isn't mental baggage that I need to carry. Right. What I'll do is I'll just grab like right here above my ears and I'll try to pop my head off like I'm a Lego, like I'm trying to pull the head off of a Lego, and then I'll resist it by pretending to be a turtle and trying to pull my head back down into my shell. And I'll just hold this for like 60 seconds, 90 seconds.
Oh, that actually feels good.
Yeah, and this because here's the thing about the hand and the skull. A lot of people think it's like, oh, it's just one thing. The skull is made of so many different little bones, and there's so many like little micro adjustments that happen based off of the muscles that are being activated. And again, with the clenched fist, with the tight face and the closed senses, right? It's the crow's feet, it's the wrinkles up here, it's the how you say the lines in the face.
Well, these ones are from smiling too much.
Well, it's also like smiling with you say limited capacity, because a lot of people, they say smile with the eyes, but it's actually more like smile with the ears, kind of like a Joker smile. Like if you can try and get your smile,
it's the fake smile.
A lot of people say that's the fake smile, but that's actually the real smile. You see little kids, they're like that's the real smile. And then we learn how to do this. And then we're told that that's the real smile and that this is the fake smile. But it's like, this is the one that's, getting back to what we were talking about here is, this exercise really helps to fill parts of the face and the neck specifically with blood. And similar to the body graph here, when there's blood, there's the ability for energy to be transferred back and forth. When there's no blood there, there's no fluidity. the road is shut down, the lake is dry, or the river is dry. You can't send supplies downstream or upstream if the water level is too low. And so a lot of these exercises, it's called sensory mechanics, by the way. And I have some what's called the archive. It's kind of just like my little membership where I teach sensory mechanics and kind of like how to put this together.
Yeah, the links, if you want to connect, this is a good time to interrupt you for that. If you want to connect with Marco in any way, I, of course, did my due diligence before we went live, and I put all the links in the descriptions so you can connect to him any which way and find him, and then look at his websites. It has all the different information of all the different things he's doing. Because he's always teaching courses. You do readings, you do this, you do that. So go to his site and see what he's doing, because we don't know when you're watching this video, and there could be something new.
True, very true. Yeah, me and one of my friends, we were talking about hosting like an in-person retreat sometime next year when we have more of this. Because one thing as well about me is
in Hawaii.
In Hawaii, yeah.
Oh. I might pin that on my calendar.
Well, you guys definitely, everything gets put on ReikiMarco.com. Everything gets shared on my socials. So, again, to stay connected, ReikiMarco.com. All my socials are linked on my website as well. But I've always been Reiki Marco because Reiki saved my life. It's like the equivalent of people being like, Jesus saved my life. It's like Reiki saved my life, because I was literally going down such a dark path. Until my mom was like, you need to do Reiki. And I was like, Mom, I don't want to do any more mushrooms. Like, that kind of messed me up last time. She's like, it's not mushrooms. It's just talk to the lady. And for anyone that hasn't experienced Reiki, and be mindful of who you choose to experience Reiki with, because not all Reiki practitioners are, you could say, heart-centered. There's plenty of people like spiritual charlatans out there that are just like here to get the ego trip, or here to like show you the pretty lights to make money, whatever. Use your intuition, and if you do get duped by one of those people, just learn, it's all part of the process. No one's here to be perfect. What I was saying is that,
sorry, I was gonna say it's cool. The first time I had Reiki, I was at a spa and I was 5 months pregnant, and he was doing Reiki on me. And it was the first time my daughter, I guess she felt all the energy. She started turning and kicking, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yep.
So my first Reiki was 22, 23 years ago. And that was the first time I felt my daughter move. That was so cool.
Oh man, I remember practicing Reiki on my partner when she was pregnant, and I would feel all the time my daughter just kicking and doing flips and all kinds of stuff. Children, and again, this is the thing about human design as well, is like, as children, we know our design. It's inherent. It's not a cognitive thing. It's internally, this is what's turned on. And so you see like manifester, like my daughter is a manifester, which is only 9% of the population. They are the beings that have, I can actually just show you her chart. She has her emotional center connected to her throat. So again, these are the 4 energy centers. When one of them is connected to the throat directly, and there's no sacral defined, that's what makes a manifestor. Only 9% of the world is this way.
Okay, so reflectors are 1%, manifestors are 9.
Yep, and then you have projectors, which are 20%. This is non-sacral beings and not manifestor beings, but they have some definition. This is 20, and these are like the guides, right? These are the people that oftentimes they feel really awkward because they have a lot of guidance and they see things that other people don't see, but they have to be invited to share, because they don't have this sacral. This is like one of the primary energy sources that in the human body, again, sexual creative energy. And it's not that they don't have a sacral, but there's this undefined. So it's not consistent energy. They don't wake up with the same full tank of gas. Sometimes they wake up and their gas tank is still empty, right? And so for them, in order to have a proper strategy or to not exhaust themselves, they have to wait for people to recognize their unique circuitry before they start to invest energy into somebody else. So a lot of this strategy stuff, right, that I'm talking about, it's really about optimizing your physical and non-physical energy. Optimizing, right? Like what's the best way? It's not like this is 100% of the time guaranteed always going to do it, but it's like 99.98% of all germs will die if you use your strategy and authority properly, right? Because it just saves you from engaging into things or putting yourself in situations where people don't see you, where they don't respect what you actually have to offer, and where you're actually, like, again, lying to yourself about whether or not you want to invest energy into it. Because again, I'm sure you and Helene probably have spent a lot of energy putting energy into things that are like not relevant to you at all because of this mental pressure. People will put mental pressure on you.
Oh yeah,
Just
I've
because,
tried a lot of things. I
yeah,
say I throw a lot of stuff on the wall and see what sticks.
exactly. And that's part of, it's really part of our circuitry as human beings, is to experiment. And the problem is like, once we grow up, we stop experimenting. Like I was saying, as children, we know this inherently. It's not a mental concept that you have to learn as a child. It's just inherent knowing, right? And that's why kids
Yeah.
move through emotions so quickly. It's like kids can be like, oh, I hate you, you're the worst, no, you don't love me, blah blah blah. And then it's like you give them ice cream and they're like, mommy's the best, I love mommy, right? They don't hold on to that stuff in their brain because they haven't developed that prefrontal cortex and that like
Yeah.
executive decision making part of our brain. It's really just supposed to help give us context to what's going on around us, but we're still supposed to consider survival and emotional parts of our brain. But again, naturally, when we get older, we learn to rely too much on that executive external, oh, this looks good to everybody else, and as opposed to, this doesn't feel good to me inside me, it doesn't feel healthy to me. Because plenty of people are like, doing yoga and destroying their bodies, doing meditation and destroying their bodies, right? Because it looks good on paper, but when it comes to their physical body and their emotional body, it doesn't actually sync up with them, and there are
Mm.
subtle signals that are being overridden again by the mind. So anyway, I was going
Oh
to
my
say I'm
God.
a heretic because I'm not a professional. I'm not like, I didn't get trained by the Jovian archive. I'm not an analyst. But I can outpace analysts because, like, when I was in college, I was just like, I don't want to lean on any certifications. And I understand that certain people are not going to work with me because I don't have the quote unquote professional accolades. But I'm like, I don't want to work with those people because I want to do the experimental work. I want to do the R&D. I like being in the underground. And then the more I learn about my profiles and my human design, the more I realize, like, oh, I'm totally built for that. I'm totally built to just like rip systems apart and make new systems and have them fumble and make mistakes. And it's still something that I have to work through. I'm not trying to say that, like, oh, I'm the best at making mistakes and I don't ever hiccup or feel down on myself. Like, I had a guy reach out to me today that was like, there's no unsubscribe button on your membership. And I'm like, oh, dang it. I don't want to lock people into memberships and stuff. So I had to go make an unsubscribe button. But I could have spent another 2-3 months, 5 years not putting that out there because it wasn't perfect yet. And this is just,
Oh,
and again, this is,
yeah, I've learned just do it and fix it later.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Because if you wait till it's perfect, you will wait forever.
yeah,
But the other thing too is that I like that you rip things apart. And I kind of did that. I remember being in college,
mm-hmm,
my first year, English was a mandatory for the degree. And I got a C back on this paper. And I remember thinking, that's okay. It doesn't matter. I'm never going to be a writer. I'm almost published book number 10.
yeah,
So it doesn't matter. And actually, there's a really cool story that proved to me that you don't have to have the degree. In 2004, when I was contemplating going back to work or trying to figure out what I'm doing, what's my next step? Because my daughter was 2.5, and I'm like, okay, I need to do something now.
mm-hmm,
I won a trip to LA, and it was to Bob Bloomer's house, and he's a chef and a cookbook author. And what was fascinating was, I also think that was destined, because he was cooking for us and we're hanging out, we're drinking wine, and he said, and I was asking him all these questions, and he was an art student that figured out how to have these gourmet meals with his friends for very inexpensive, and I'll just remove this for a second, to have all these gourmet meals with his friends, and he wrote a cookbook, but he went to school for fine arts, and then he ended up figuring out how to get all these sponsors, and he turned an Airstream camper into what looked like a toaster, like a silver toaster, and he ended up with a show on the Food Network, and he had a fine arts degree. Like, he wasn't a professionally trained chef. He didn't have, but meanwhile, he's got cookbooks and this and that. And what was interesting is I won the trip and we were there, and I was telling him about all these contesting. So I took him not needing this degree, and I went off and started writing and doing books and teaching people, thinking, okay, well, I don't have to have the piece of paper. And then he started entering cooking competitions, and he ended up in the Guinness Book of World Records for flipping the most flapjacks. So he took my contest and I took his no degree, and we both switched and went off. So I was like, that is cool.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm a huge advocate for paths of higher education. Again, there just has to be a reason internally, and not just this external, oh, I'm supposed to get a degree because that's what you're supposed to do. It's like, I want to get a degree because they teach you these things, you know, and that's where, like, you know, universities and whatnot. I was in college for like half a semester or something. I don't really even remember how long.
But that was good because that set you on your path. You tried something, you discovered, thankfully, quickly it wasn't for you. Because imagine the people that go through and get their law degree and started a law firm, and now they're like, this isn't for me. Right. But you figured it out quick. T. Harv Eker always said, ready, fire, aim. And the idea is like, you shot the gun, you went, oh yeah, this school isn't for me. And so then you re-aim, like you figured it out fast. Like, I can't remember who said fail fast.
Oh man, so many people.
There's I don't know who the original one was, but basically you failed fast and went, all right. And off you went. You didn't waste all that energy and time and resources on something that wasn't you. So you should I would actually frame that as a blessing that you figured it out quickly. And look where you are in this like freaking cool bus. You got to give a tour sometime. I have not seen that on any of your channels. Maybe I missed it because, you know, TikTok goes fast.
A little tour real quick. This is like all my, it's kind of messy. I'm a musician as well. So that's fun. That's my mixer board, my microphone, and then also just like it's like kind of like my closet, so to speak. Super messy. That's my altar where all my clothes are, my water, etc. Some of my daughter's toys, and then this is my bed, and I just sleep right there. And then this is
you got everything you need. Oh, look at the view.
And this is literally like the Tarzan forest where, you know, he's like sliding around on his bare feet. That's how I train. It's like it's a mix of like climbing and running. So I'll like do sprints up the hill, and then I'll come and I'll like try and get through the forest as fast as I can, or get through the forest with only one arm or one leg and stuff like that. So I'm very in not necessarily my professional world. I'm like a monkey and a fighter at heart. And so I bring a lot of that into, again, how do I use human design? Like if I'm fighting a generator, I'm like, oh, give them something to respond to that's a fake, and then slip it, and then sneak a punch in. If I'm fighting a projectile,
that's so sneaky.
Invite them to hit me, and then do something, and then counter punch it or something, like, you know. So it's really funny how how little amount of time human design has been around, and the vast amounts of applications that there are for human design. And also, like, there's so many things that human design, I feel like, is not necessarily helpful for. In the instance that it's like, people are like, ask me a lot, like, hey, are generators and projectors compatible? And I'm like, yeah, if they're being themselves, totally. You know, so it's again,
that's
one of the
key right there.
Yeah.
Being themselves.
It's so important. It's so simple, and it's definitely easier said than done, but it's definitely possible, especially with the tools that we have nowadays. You know,
Yeah.
again, people are obsessed with like having a bunch of knowledge, because especially like if you have a bunch of knowledge and you put it on Instagram or you put it on TikTok, you know, people start following you and you're getting attention. But it's very rarely the right type of attention. Like there's very few, I would say, few creators that are actually being authentic on camera. And for most of us, we can feel whether or not someone is being authentic on camera or not. A lot of people also cannot feel it at all, and they'll end up buying courses that are not relevant for them, or that are just regurgitated from something that they learned somewhere else, that they're trying to like hide it. You know, for me, like Samuel Sagan, Pasha Urshan, Marissa Morris, like none of my stuff is original. And that's part of being a reflector and accepting myself, is realizing like Ra created human design. I didn't create human design. I just came in like a monkey and just started banging it against rocks and being like, yeah, this works. Oh, and also if you do this, it's helpful. And if you do this, it's helpful. And then I just watch and see who picks it up and who actually does work with it. And like I said, I've had clients that I've been working with for even before human design, but with human design for years, and their lives are completely different. Like they're like, I don't hang out with any of my friends from my old life, and if I do, it's under these circumstances. Like I'm doing something that I love. Like it's just complete 180, because having the roadmap and the treasure map is not the same as actually like going and digging for the treasure. But going and digging for the treasure is also not the best way that you can do things, because you might spend your entire life digging in the wrong place. Whereas human design, it shows you dig here. You just keep digging there, right? For you, it's like keep digging in the sacral, keep digging into the emotions, because that's where all of your treasure is going to be. And in terms of manifestation, you know, it really ought to be one where it's like, okay, you know, how can I deepen into satisfaction? How can I more integrally use my sacral energy, and how much deeper can I go with my emotions, and how much more can I give myself the things that I need, right? Because that's where you're going to get those feelings of like, I feel like myself now, right? Because you can spend endless amount of time solving other people's problems and adopting different identities and getting this certification and proving yourself in this capacity. But unless you're satisfied and you're paying attention to your emotions, you could be doing all that and you'll never feel like yourself.
Yeah, see, I think this is what a lot of people do. Like as I've aged, I care less about what people think and I just do my own thing. So when I start dating again, one of the thoughts I had was, who's going to deal with this? Like this crazy person who likes to enter contests as a hobby, who writes books, who goes off on these crazy adventures. Like in March, I went on a road trip by myself and I drove through 18 states in 12 days. And I visited like fellow sweepers, and I went to the Hadsell household and hung out with Dyke, and then I went and met her granddaughter, and then I went and saw friends in Tennessee, and then I came home. Like I just went on this adventure just by myself. See ya. You know, like, and I needed someone that was gonna, because at that point I thought, okay, I'm not bending to somebody else's time. I'm just gonna be this crazy person.
For real though.
Hang out with me or don't.
That's kind of it. That's kind of, and big part of my strategy as well has been of like, yeah, like, look, if you don't vibe with it, then I'm not keeping you here. You know, I'm not keeping you here. And in fact, I will push you out. I will push you out if you're like here for any other reason than you absolutely want to be here. That's it. That's it.
But I think it's funny that you're a reflector. And I'm looking out your window, and I think your environment is actually reflecting you.
Well, so you know, I didn't always live in a place like this. Like I grew up in San Diego, and I spent a lot of time like in my van traveling around, so the environment would change a lot. When I moved to Maui, one thing about environments as well, or human design, is that it tells you what environment really you're like most suited for. Wide valleys is my environment, and I'm in a wide valley. And specifically, valleys are about like where energy flows and being.
That
like
makes sense, like rivers.
Energy. There's a stream right here. It's dry, unfortunately, because some people are stealing water on Hawaii, which is a whole big issue. But I'm in the valley. I'm in my environment. Digestion as well is part of environment. They're closely linked together. Part of my digestion is low sound, and so I eat in quiet usually, or there's like really low music, or just like the wind blowing. because when there's like
Oh,
loud music conversations or people are talking, I just won't eat. And and then when there's a moment of silence, I'll like start eating. And so it's, again, it's turned, human design has gone from like kind of awkward to mechanical to now where it just feels very natural for me. And that, to that point, it's like I've developed the senses and the ability to see when someone is acting. I don't even need to know your design. I can tell you're frustrated. You're not listening to your gut. I felt your gut get excited about this thing and you let it just walk away. What's that about? If you want to hang around me, I'm going to poke at these questions because that's part of my. I don't
yes.
want to reflect people that are frustrated. And it's not that I hate frustration. Again, like I was saying, it's fine for you to be frustrated, but some people just like dwell in that and they stew in that and they make their whole life, they identify with that. And that's
Oh,
fine.
yes.
Plenty of people that don't want to be that way and are willing to do the work. And again, that's those are the people that I'm looking for. It's honest people that are willing to do the work. I'll work with anyone. And I've worked with people of all ages too. I'll work with like, 15, 16-year-old boys. I'll worked with like 60, 70-year-old women. And I'm like, there's nobody that human design can't help except for the people that don't want the help. And that's
Well,
fine
the
too.
people that don't want your help aren't going to seek you out. But
Exactly.
that's amazing because Helene did that. As she said, and I can't remember which book it's in at this point. It's one of the 3 that she wrote that had this advice. She said that as long as you're here, actually, I know where it is. It's in her Points to Ponder, which I found out later were her interpretations of the Sanskrit tablets for the rules to being human. And one of them is, if you're here, you're learning. So that's why even if you get your 70-year-old person, they're still here. So they still have time to learn because until you take that last breath, you are learning.
And that's she just seems like such a cool person. I'm definitely going to do some meditations and call her in and have a little.
Oh my gosh, you're going to have fun with her.
I did the podcast. I'm sure you're very stoked on this. Anything else for me?
No, I just want everyone to go check you out. And of course, my favorite is TikTok. I got hooked on TikTok. I think it's so fun. And so if you're on that channel, otherwise, do you share your same videos on other channels too?
Yeah, everything is on YouTube and Instagram, LinkedIn. TikTok is the best place to go though, because TikTok is where I will go live. I'll go live like a couple times a week. And that's I think was one of the coolest things about TikTok is the way that they've integrated the lives and the streaming into the platform itself. Because you can go live on Instagram, but it's not the same,
Right.
TikTok has that like gamification and that like feeling of engagement that like mostly it's in gaming that you see that kind of stuff. But with TikTok, that's where I'll go live. That's probably where I'm most excited to create content because, with Instagram, it feels like a stage and YouTube feels like a stage or a classroom or a university. And with TikTok, it's like, hey, come into my bus, come into my living room. And that's where I really want to engage with people is like on this like casual level, because I have so much knowledge in my brain and I could literally just talk for hours about human design.
Yeah, I love teachers like that. I've always loved what I call long form teachers.
Right. Yeah. And if I'm addressing a group of 10,000 people versus 10 people versus one person, I'm pretty much the same. Might talk a little louder if I'm talking to 10,000 people, but I'm generally going to be similar. And I'm a little rough, I'll drop some F-bombs and curse a little bit, but that's just authentically kind of how it comes through. And I got permission to do this from this creator Gary Vee, because he talks about how again, so many people are inauthentic and they'll say something like, do I care about my employees? And when in actuality, the question is more like, do I give an F about my employees? And that's like, he's like, that's more authentic for me. So yeah, there's so many ways again that the mind can kind of just like, how you say, diminish the self, because it's or attempt to refine the self beyond the point of like maintaining the essence of like what it is that it's even being refined. And that's the thing, people will like optimize themselves or get injections and things like that. Now you don't even look like yourself anymore. You know, all
No,
all
I can't do that. I just, yeah. I like, yeah, this is it. This is the package. And you know, the hair might change and the glasses might change, but the the soul's the same.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for coming on and talking about Helene and how it makes so much sense to me now how she was is a direct reflection of the patterns she came in with. And unfortunately, she wasn't here in person, but I'm sure you're going to get some answers, more answers when you meditate and talk to her. And finish your books. Wait till you get to the chapter on naked dancing. Just saying.
I do that. Part of the reason I live in a valley surrounded by trees is so that I can just be naked, working in the yard, gardening, and doing all that stuff. It's so.
Yeah, you'll definitely get along with her.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
And on that note, thank you very much. And check out Marco on all of his channels, especially TikTok.